I'm Adam Natali. I'm the director of SVA Theater. We're so pleased to have you here tonight for this special screening of West Side Story, even if you did happen to watch it on PBS last night. So on the big screen here, you're in for a real treat, and we're thrilled to have Academy Award-winning actor George Chakiris with us here this evening. So he'll be here afterwards to do a Q&A with Susan Haskins Doloff, the executive producer and co-host of Theater Talk on PBS. So if you watch that, you'll recognize her. And I'm so glad to have my friend and colleague Leslie Ann Bennett here tonight, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the event. But a few quick notes. First off, please silence your cell phones. We like to really have the cinematic experience here, and the lights and the sounds are annoying, I'm sure. And the other thing is, traditionally, sometimes this movie is shown with an intermission. We won't have that intermission this evening, but there will be sort of like a minute or two pause. So if you feel like running to the restroom and getting back, there'll be a minute or two pause in there. And then, as you probably saw on your way in, this screening, and as well as the one tonight, the one tomorrow at 7, so if you want to come back, we're welcome to have you back, is benefiting the Charge Syndrome Foundation, and Leslie will tell you a little bit more about that as well. So welcome, Leslie.
Thank you all for coming. First of all, I want to thank everyone that came. This is an extraordinary opportunity, actually, to see West Side Story I think the way it was meant to be seen, which is on the big screen. And I personally fell in love with this film when I was a child. My father directed musicals my whole life, and this one just stuck in my head. And to be here tonight and to be able to honor not only my father's legacy, but musicals in general. I think every generation has a musical that we're drawn to, that we feel passionate about. And then there are certain films that become so iconic as musicals that every generation falls in love with it, even if it's brand new to them. And this is one of those films. When I was doing research to prepare for tonight, one of the things I found out was this is been voted as one of the most culturally influential films of all time, not just musicals, but of every kind of film. So with that being said, this is a very important night for George as well, because a portion of the proceeds benefit the Charge Syndrome Foundation, for which he's very passionate about. And the young lady that inspired him, Isabel Kluber, is here tonight with us. So we welcome her and her mother, Yara. So please enjoy West Side Story in all of its greatness and have a wonderful time. Thank you for coming.
Enjoy. I'd now like to welcome to the stage Susan Haskins Doloff, again, executive producer and co-host of Theater Talk on PBS, and our very special guest this evening, George Chakiris.
Wow. Hey, thank you. Wow, thanks very much. Thank you. Wow, you're so nice. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, bravo, George Chakiris.
Hey, well, you were nice enough to applaud when my name came on the screen, but those other names, Jerome Robbins, Leonard Bernstein, oh.
Well, and I want to ask you
applause,
about them, yes. Yeah, and but I first want to say, I was sitting there watching the film thinking about how much has changed and how much has stayed the same. And you have stayed the same. You look remarkably wonderful for 54 years after this film was shot, right?
54,
right?
Yeah.
In 1960 you were shot, or 61.
61. It was
61,
released in 61, right? Yeah.
So I'm going out of order here, but first I want to ask you, as you watch the film now, was there a thought that dominated your mind as it drew to a close?
Well, I'm always overwhelmed and awed by the beauty of this film and the people behind this film: Jerome Robbins, Leonard Bernstein, Arthur Lawrence, Stephen Sondheim. It's such a beautiful, beautiful piece. I've seen stage productions of West Side Story, in recent years, and they have changed some of. I would think you would not want to change because I'm sorry, I'm just so overwhelmed by Natalie, Rita Moreno, of course, Russ, Tucker Smith, who played Ice. I mean, he's just every time I look at this movie, I see something different. I notice something else. At the end of this, when at the very end, when Maria is on her on the ground, and everybody is coming in everybody's leaving, and it's such a beautiful choice because the character who comes and puts the shawl over her head is Baby John. And I think I noticed that tonight, and that's Jerry Robbins. That's so beautifully directed. He's the perfect character to put the shawl on her head. I mean, I think...
Was that Elliot Feld?
Elliot Feld.
Yeah.
Elliot, he's so beautiful, as Baby John, so beautiful.
Now, I want to jump to the middle of the film, to the Rumble, as I was watching it tonight. And Robbins directed the Rumble, correct? Or did he? I know Robbins left midway through the film, but did he direct the Rumble?
He didn't. He didn't photograph it, but everything in this movie, from all the scenes, all the musicals, everything was rehearsed for many months before filming ever began. So yes. Jerry and Bob together directed everything. Although Jerry was more intimate with us. So to answer your question, Jerry and Bob directed everything.
All right. All right.
It was just up to Bob to photograph it once. I make that sound so simple, just to photograph it.
Well, no, but you read that Robbins was essentially fired at one point in the film.
He was, yeah. But I think he was fired, thank God, after a lot of it had been filmed.
But not the Rumble.
Not the Rumble, no.
And the reason I asked that is because because Robbins, I know, began at the Actor Studio. He was very interested in the method, in using the method for directing, correct? Method acting.
I didn't understand that.
No, did Robbins use? Robbins had been a student of method acting.
Absolutely, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so I'm watching you giving your well-deserved Academy Award performance.
Okay, thank you.
In the right. And he beat Montgomery Clift in Judgment at Nuremberg, and George C. Scott, and Peter Falk, and I forget, Jackie Gleason. Right, but you won. Yeah. And in the Rumble, I'm watching your acting, and I was thinking, and I know you had 10 weeks of rehearsal or something remarkable, but I thought, while they were filming that, how was the director working with George Chakiris to get moment by moment? You obviously had the chops, that amazing performance.
Well, gosh, thank you. Let's see. For me, even when Jerry was gone, to me, he was always there. Because Bob is an incredible filmmaker and a wonderful, wonderful director. He's an incredible editor, of course. I mean, the editing in this film is remarkable. But Bob never said anything. He just filmed the sequences, and he would say things like, "Let's keep it alive now, and let's put a salt and pepper in it." That was basically his. And it sounds like a terrible thing to say. It was fine for him to say that because we had been so well rehearsed. And again, for me, it's Jerry.
So you've done your preparation.
Yes.
You've done your preparation by the time the cameras roll.
And I felt his presence even when he wasn't there.
Yes.
And he was, for me, he was there all the time.
Now, I won't dwell on Robbins, but I will say that Rita Moreno, your friend Rita Moreno, said, as cruel as he could be, Robbins really brought out the best in everyone. We were all scared to death of him, and it's not fun to work when you are frightened. Were you scared of Robbins?
I wasn't. Well, maybe in a way, I wasn't scared because I had done the London company playing Riff.
That's right.
And already worked with Jerry. I wasn't scared so much as he was such a perfectionist with himself first, and you just felt that when he came into rehearsal, we before we started filming, there was always a class, a ballet class, a ballet bar for everyone to warm up before Jerry came in. And then we'd have a cup of coffee or something, and Jerry came into the space to rehearse. He came in very quietly, just really quiet. But when he was in the room, my best way of describing it is there was electricity in the air. And I think everybody felt, again, just Jerry's presence. And to me, the heart and soul really of this piece and the film is basically, it's everyone, of course, but to me, it's Jerry, and of course the score by Leonard Bernstein. I mean, those are the things that make us feel something, and I think we're left. I feel so much at the end of this movie. I'm always taken in by it, but I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
No, I was knocked out when watching the end right now of how powerful it was.
Yeah.
To me, even now, it just knocks you out, that end.
So a couple of other things crossed my mind. There has been word out, I don't know if it's true or not, that Steven Spielberg is thinking about remaking West Side Story. So.
Oh, boo!
But
leave it alone, Steven Spielberg.
For example,
terrible idea.
What we call the taunting scene, where Anita comes to the drugstore to get aspirin and she wants to see Doc, and that whole rape scene.
Yeah, that's devastating.
And if someone was doing that today, I think everything is so different today, and everything's. Not everything, and some things are sort of in our face, so to speak. But if they were shooting that, somebody's clothes would have to come off.
Yes, yes, we would have to have.
And it's so unnecessary and distracting. It's so beautiful this way.
It would be like the Virgin Spring, or right. No, and I was also thinking, and this doesn't involve you, but how that naive, chaste romance between Maria and Tony would be impossible today. They'd have jumped in and had sex immediately, and that way, it would. I thought you can't have that kind of scenario now.
Well, no,
am I wrong?
Again, going back to the stage version, when it's done today, Arthur Lawrence did a version. Well, he did West Side, directed it. He had written the book, of course, for West Side, for the theater, and he did a version maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
That's how I saw it. I saw it.
And when Tony comes up, I mean, he did direct it differently. They were really anxious to get to each other physically. It was like, so, he was hot to try, so on. And the reason I didn't think that was a good choice, because the beauty, even today, of seeing two people who really love each other, if you make it physical, if that's the underlying reason, you miss the beauty and the importance of their love for each other. And so I love this way.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
As it is, that iconic moment. I hate to use the word iconic. We had Elaine Stritch on our show, and she said, "What is iconic? A mouthwash?" But anyway.
Everything's iconic.
What does that mean? But anyway, you have that moment of Tony and Maria at the gym, which is now a cliche of romance, Tony and Maria at the gym. But if they were going to have sex that night and that was it, and then instead of the next day or whatever it was, that it would be blown.
Yeah, you lose so much if you go in that direction.
Yeah. So now, how did you come to be in this movie?
Oh, okay. I was Jerry cast me as Riff in the London company. It was a year after I'd been playing in New York, and
I saw your picture. You were blonde.
No,
you were the blonde Riff. But you were. It was a black and white picture I saw. So.
Okay, yeah, you couldn't. Really
you were
tell.
fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I tell people now that I say, you played Riff, they just can't see that. But I did, and that's how I did it for a year and a half, working with Jerry and that incredible direction. And so when the time came for them to make the film, we heard rumors backstage at the theater in London. They were thinking of names like Elvis Presley and Elizabeth Taylor, big huge movie names, and so none of us ever thought anything about getting anywhere near this movie. I never did. But one day, but they tested many kids from the New York production, from the London production, I'm sure from other places too. I tested for, I had a letter from United Artists asking me to do a test, pick a scene as Riff, pick a scene as Bernardo, and one day 5 of us from the London company went out to Elstree Studios outside of London and had this incredible day, doing a movie test, a screen test. It was wild. And then we got back to the theater for the show that night, and so the weeks started to go by. We passed each other in the hallway. Have you heard anything? No, nobody had heard anything. About 5 or 6 weeks, we figured that was that. Then one night before the show, I got a call from Jerry. He said, "We liked your test, but we'd like to test you further, and could you get a week's leave of absence from the theater?" Well, nothing was going to stop me, but they gave me a week's leave of absence. I flew to LA and I met Robert Wise for the first time, and I did a test that Jerry directed, a test as Bernardo, with a wonderful girl, Barbara Luna, who was a very close contender for the role of Anita. And I got to see my parents, I got to see my family. I hadn't seen them for a long time. And then I went back into the show again after a week. And then the weeks go by again, and Robert Wise, he was such a gentleman. He's such a nice man. He sent me a letter that he didn't have to send to anybody, but he sent me a letter saying, "We're very sorry that we haven't let you know anything yet, but we feel that we have to cast Maria before we cast her brother." Well, it ended up they cast me before anyway, and the way he found Natalie, he had heard about Warren Beatty in the movie Splendor of the Grass, and he went to Warner Brothers to watch, a scene from Splendor of the Grass with Warren Beatty, and he saw Natalie, and he said, "That's my Maria."
Well, and she was hardly an unknown commodity.
Absolutely, yeah. When Natalie came on, she's 23, but
23.
When she walked in very simply, very nice, just gorgeous, amazing.
And you and she became great friends, did you not?
Yeah, we became pretty good friends, but she was great.
I want to read Arthur Lawrence's, who wrote the book, description of Bernardo. That he put in the original, this is from the original script of West Side Story.
Oh.
He said, "Handsome, proud, fluid, a sardonic chip on his shoulder.
Oh.
He's tough and calloused by necessity, from dealing daily with the virulent prejudices of not just the Jets and the cops, but bigoted New York in general. Scratch his leonine poise and panache, and there's a gladiator capable of murder."
Wow. I'd never heard that before.
You didn't? Well, no. And I think absolutely when you hear that, you say, "And this is the guy. He got it." You are leonine in that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that they say, I hear once in a while, yeah, Bernardo was the bad guy. He was the bad. Well, he wasn't the bad guy, because in fact they say we came to this country believing and so on, and that's what they came to this country for. But when they're out on the street, right away, they're hit on by the Jets, and so they have to defend themselves.
No, you feel great sympathy for the Shah.
Oh, okay.
I felt, know. I mean, now I want to say I was sitting with my friend Kevin McInerney, and he made a question, asked a question which I think is great. He pointed out to me that you were the only principal who sang your songs all the way through. Is that not true?
Well, you know what? I didn't really sing in the American number. It's Forrest Murphy. It's not
that wasn't you?
A heavy singing role. But of course, Natalie was. Her voice was
dubbed.
Mary Nixon.
Richard Bamer was.
Richard had. I can't remember the guy who sang for him, but it's wonderful. It fits Richard so perfectly.
And even Rita Moreno was dubbed.
I've learned that Rita Moreno was dubbed as well by Betty Wand, and who else? Tucker Smith, who plays Ice, and he does Cool. Cool is so fantastic. But he sang for himself. But it was Tucker who did the Jet song for Russ.
Right.
I don't know why, because Russ did it just fine.
And then Russ sang Officer Cruppy for
That's
himself.
right, absolutely.
But now, when they were dubbing it though, how did that work? Would for instance, Rita Moreno in the America, was she singing herself, and then they did a track, or was she,
Well,
they playing a track and she was listening, or how
I-
would that go?
I remember we went to the recording studio on the lot, and we all were together recording the American number. Rita, the girls, all of us. So when we were filming it, to me, that was Rita, and I think it was. So what they did after that, I don't know. For example, adding Marnie Nixon's voice for Natalie. So post-production, I don't know exactly what they did and how they did it, but any changes that were made vocally were done.
Imposed.
Yeah, that's right.
So then when did you first see the film all put together?
I saw it, let's see, I saw it in New York. I saw it here. When I came to New York in 1958 and looking for work, and then
Yes.
these friends of mine put me up, and that's how I got to audition for Jerry at that time. One of them was a good friend of Carol Burnett, so Carol Burnett and these two girls and I went to the River, I can't remember the theater, and we sat in the balcony and we watched West Side. That was the first time.
So you didn't go to a big premiere? You just went to
Well,
with your
eventually
house?
we did, yeah.
Eventually, but
Yeah,
first you went off to
there
see
was the premiere
yeah.
in L.A.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and New York as well, yeah.
But you went with Carol Burnett and your friends to see this movie.
Right.
And you hadn't seen any of the graphics or anything like that.
I went once to the rushes, because
You did,
Natalie
yeah.
said, come on, you should see.
Yeah.
And once was enough for me. I didn't want to go after that.
But then did you see for the first time that the voices were dubbed? Or you knew that was happening?
I didn't know that was happening.
So did you go, wow, that's not Natalie?
I've learned a lot of this stuff in recent years,
Yeah,
surprise, surprise,
that's it. So you just, but you knew that was not Natalie when you heard,
I'm sorry?
when you saw the movie, you knew that that was not Natalie Wood singing.
Oh, that I knew, of course. We
Yes.
knew that. That was,
yeah.
yes.
All right. Now,
And Richard.
I don't want to have George all to myself. Well, if any of you have questions, we would love to have you ask a question. You have to go over to that microphone.
There
Or
are
there's-
two microphones.
There's
on
two
each
microphones.
side.
So if you have a question, like,
Please come up and you can.
ma'am, would you, if you'd go up to the microphone?
We're actually recording. I know it's a little tough. but-
Yeah.
Oh, good luck, right?
Not-
Oh, yeah.
Can I go? First of all, it's an incredible honor to speak with you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
I first saw this movie when I was 8 years old, so to talk to you is just unbelievable. One thing I've always wanted to know, is there any film of you as Riff in London?
Is there any film of you as Riff in London?
No,
No.
no.
No, nowhere, not even at your house or anything?
Well, I just thought maybe that film test I did, where I did a scene, but I don't know where any of that. They
Wouldn't
probably
that be
threw it all
wonderful?
away.
If I'll find this picture. Who's the guy? Bert. We on Theater Talk, we had 4 veterans of various companies of West Side Story who wrote a book together. And the short guy, Bert
Michaels.
Yes, Bert Michaels was there.
Oh,
And
gosh, Bert. of course.
he gave me the picture of you in London, which I will find it, and I'll put it
I've
on
seen
Theater
the-
Talk's Facebook. You've seen it.
I've
All
seen
right.
the picture. I
Yeah,
was just
that's
wondering
it.
if there was film. Nope.
Nope. Next question.
What was it like to work with Natalie Wood? Was she nice?
Oh, guys.
Oh, was Natalie Wood nice?
She was very nice. She was darling. Really, really darling.
So she wasn't stuck up because she was a young starlet married to Robert Wagner and having an affair with Warren Beatty.
Well, first of all, she was a very, very talented, very she was kind of an intellectual, actually.
Really?
At the age of 23, but she'd been in films since she was a kid, so she was a real thoroughbred, a real professional, and she knew exactly how to perform for film. And I'm sure she was going to do a play, but I'm sure she would have done that very well too. But she was just a dream. She was so darling. She was so sweet. She was so nice. She was funny, and just so smart. So smart. I loved her. Really loved her. We all did. We all did. Yeah.
Not to change the subject, but I'm a big fan of another brilliant film that you did, The Young Girls of Rochefort, and
Oh,
I
yes.
wonder if you could talk about
Thank
your
you.
work
Thanks
with
for that. Yeah, that
Jacques
was-
Demy and Catherine Deneuve and Michel
Yeah.
Legrand.
Oh, yeah, Catherine Deneuve and,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, good, Catherine. Yes. Interesting thing about very quickly about that movie, directed by, written and directed by Jacques Demy with the music of Michel Legrand. In The Young Girls of Rochefort, he has his version of a quintet, which of course he got from West Side. And the two girls are dressed in red sequin gowns, which he got from Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. So he had bits and pieces, not bits and pieces, but some elements of things that he admired. And he didn't steal from them, he just used them because he admired them and they worked for his movie. But again, the influence of West Side on someone like him was really nice.
and how amazing to think you were in that scene with Marilyn Monroe
Yeah.
in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite things is to say, I was one of many guys in this number with, it's such a great number. Diamond's our girl's best friend. Jack Cole, the choreographer, was extraordinary. Yeah, I got to be in the same room as Marilyn Monroe for
How long did it take to shoot that?
3 days, till 9 o'clock the third night. Yeah, it took weeks to rehearse it, but 3 days to shoot it.
Now, had she, how can I put this? Had she reached a troubled phase yet, or was she pretty on top of it?
Oh, very on top. Well, watching her on those 3 days, she was very concentrated. She was very quiet. When they yelled "cut" for any reason, she didn't go look in the mirror or go to her dress. She went right back to her starting position to start just like everybody else. She was very, very serious about what she was doing, and I understand that she was a perfectionist as well.
Really?
So,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
that makes sense.
But she was phenomenal. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Krishna, and what a gorgeous honor it is to meet you. You know, West Side Story is my most favorite musical. I've been trying to understand where, I know parts of it were filmed in New York City behind Lincoln Center, or
Well, before Lincoln Center was
Yeah.
Lincoln Center was built, right?
right. So was the entire film filmed here in New York City, or was there was studio work in New York City? I'm not sure.
Talk
Well, all right. So was it all filmed in New York City, or was it just New York City on location? Then where else did you film it?
The prologue, the opening sequence,
Right.
that was filmed here in New York at 98th and Amsterdam, and all those buildings got torn down afterwards. And another location was 110th and 2nd Avenue, a school that's still there, and the schoolyard is still there. But they replicated that schoolyard in the studio as well. But so those are the two locations where we filmed in New York, and the rest was in the studio in Los Angeles. Yeah. Yeah, and the sets by Boris Levin are so fantastic. You know, when we were doing the America number, you know, on the rooftop, and
Yes,
the
yeah.
buildings on the other side, and then the windows, on one of the window sills, something that no one, Rita saw it, that no one would ever see. There was a little pair of white baby shoes that had been put out, okay, just been painted white to dry. Who's going to see that? No one. But Boris Levin, in his wonderful creative detail, had things like that there. He was amazing.
Beautiful. And Under the Highway was a set, right, where you died.
Yes, that's a set. Yeah.
Ugh.
What was the most difficult thing about taking on the part of Bernardo, or a really difficult scene to shoot?
What was the most difficult part of being Bernardo? What was the most difficult scene to shoot as Bernardo?
For me, one of the things that I don't know, the War Council. That is the scene in the drugstore where the Jets
Yes.
have the scene, and that was the first thing we filmed after Jerry was gone. So no one, Bob was just dealing with technical things and not saying anything to us because he knew we were well rehearsed. But
And I go back to I'm sorry to be fascinated by this, ghoulish circumstance of Jerry being removed.
Yeah.
But how did they tell you? Did they just say, well, Jerry's not coming anymore,
No,
that's it, or what?
the night before, I got
Yeah.
a call from Robert Redier, Bob's assistant director, and he
Yeah.
said, we're changing what we're filming tomorrow. We're going to go into the drugstore. That's all they said. We had no. And then one day, in filming that, between takes, Russ came over and said, I hear Jerry's been fired. And so I think Russ was happy about that. But
Now, why was Russ happy?
well, I think he, I don't really know, but
Yeah.
Jerry had a reputation for being really hard and tough and sadistic, but that was never my experience with him in the theater or on the film. I didn't see that ever. But that's when I first heard it from Russ, and then filming that scene, I was first of all, I was so unhappy to hear that. I just couldn't believe that Jerry was gone.
And you didn't know really what was going on yet, right?
No. No, didn't know.
Yeah.
But he was such a perfectionist, and he was taking too much time, really.
Right, and too much money, apparently, they
Yeah,
thought.
that's right.
So when did you hear from Jerry again after that?
Oh, well, I don't know if it was a phone call or a letter or what it was, but Jerry wanted me to play one of the I've never seen Fiddler on the Roof, I'm ashamed to say, but he directed and choreographed Fiddler on the Roof, the theater production.
Yes.
And there was a role that he thought he would like me to play, and I couldn't do it because I was doing other things.
You were too big a star at that point. It's true.
Right. And one other time, because I was always too shy to call him, but I did call him later years, and he was so nice. I didn't get to see him. He was taking care of someone who was ill, so he didn't have time. But I'll tell you what, it was Jerry Robbins who cast me as Riff in London, and he cast me as Bernardo in the film. So who do I love?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that you really began. I mean, when did you start performing? You were 10 or something like. How old were you?
Well, I was. I didn't really start performing until I started as a dancer, but that 14-year-old thing is I was sang at a church choir in Long Beach, and there was a movie sequence with us in it when I was about 14.
But you were a dancer, so my point being that then he cast you in as a dancer, but then you gave this remarkable dramatic role in West Side Story, and that started your acting career of great success.
Absolutely. Yes,
yeah,
it did.
yeah. Two more questions. All right.
Yes, this is a question. My name's Jerry. This is a question about Arthur Lawrence. So I watched the film, and I can just hear his dialogue. I know they had a screenwriter, but it just sounds like Arthur Lawrence's lines.
Arthur Lawrence, he was listening to it, and he can just hear Arthur Lawrence's script, and hears words.
And the whole story. I mean, his whole. He gave everyone life. He gives his story life. I mean, I just couldn't see anybody else but Arthur Lawrence breathing life.
Yeah, Arthur Lawrence breathing life into the script. Yeah.
So I think he was there somehow, even if they had a screenwriter. Somehow he got involved. I don't know. Maybe.
No, so you're asking, did a different screenwriter get involved with the movie? Is that what you're asking?
He wasn't credited on the film for the screenwriter. He was credited for...
So Arthur Lawrence write the whole thing?
Arthur Lawrence was of that creative team that originated West Side Story. He was the only one who was not part of the film.
Right.
The screenplay was done by Ernest Lehman. Wonderful screenplay, and a couple of the numbers had been juxtaposed in different places and made much more sense.
That's interesting, though, that they pulled in Lehman instead of having Arthur Lawrence.
Well, because Ernest Lehman was a skilled, very well-known film writer.
Yeah, but Arthur Lawrence had.
That's right, absolutely. I can't really. I'm guessing.
Yes, okay.
That the Mirrors Company had made films, perhaps with scripts by Ernest Lehman.
Right.
And maybe that association was enough for them to know that that's what they wanted to do.
Okay.
But I'm guessing.
No, these are the mysteries.
Yeah, but Ernest Lehman did
Yes.
His screenplay was wonderful.
Did he win an Oscar?
No.
No.
Yeah.
No. All right.
Yes? Oh. Even though I've seen this movie a lot of times, and you know exactly what's going to happen.
Yes, you do.
You still don't want Tony to get shot at the end, but you're praying for that. But
you don't want Bernardo to get stabbed.
Of course not.
All right.
Of course not. Well, he looks pretty good for someone who got stabbed. But you touched on this before about you being a dancer. I was going to ask you, was there any one of the characters that wasn't a professional dancer? Because the dancing is what makes you want to see this movie. Like later, I would watch it later tonight because it's so phenomenal.
Were any one of the characters not professional dancers?
No,
Were-
all of the kids were
Yeah,
professional dancers.
yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wonder that David Winter was the only person, am I not correct, who came from the Broadway company, David Winter?
Oh, I think David Winters, Tony Mordente.
Tony Mordente, yes.
Maybe I'm not sure about Tucker, but Eddie Verso was in the London company, was 16. But yes, and also Tony Mordente was married to Chita Rivera, and
Oh, I didn't realize that.
and Cheetah's a great
Yeah,
friend,
and
so.
Cheetah, and they thought Cheetah was too old. That she,
Well, she wasn't really too old at all.
No, I know.
No, but I think just photographically, Cheetah has a really defined, beautifully chiseled kind of
Yes,
face.
yeah.
So I think they went for a softer kind of face, maybe.
Now, was Rita Moreno the only Latina in the movie?
The only what?
Oh, the only person of you're not supposed to say
I
Hispanic
remember
now,
that
but
Rita and I were sitting around. She said, she and I said, we're the two oldest people here.
no, old, but she was the only Latin in it, wasn't she?
No.
Tony Mordente, yeah,
Jose
but
de
of the
Vega,
principals.
the number of Latin.
Right.
Yeah, I know that's sometimes a subject that people are interested in. But she in the starring role, she was the only Latin. Yes.
Right.
I mean, she's incredible. She's just wonderful.
And of course, in the Steven Spielberg movie, he will have to rethink the whole thing.
And by the way, I've always thought in the theater production and in this film, the best role, to look at it that way, is Anita, because there's something about that role that sort of encompasses, I don't know, a full circle of a person. Anyway, it's.
Although I did find myself thinking when Maria convinces her to go, and I think, boy, I would not be that forgiving. After Tony stabbed you, I would not be going, okay, I'll go over to the drugstore and straighten it out.
One of the moments there that really just get me every time I see this movie, when you see after the rumble, and then you see Maria on the rooftop, that lovely blue dress, just by herself, thinking of Tony and going, and then Jose de Vega Chino comes in onto the rooftop and says, "You've been fighting him," and she said, and that he tries to tell her what's been happening. She says, "Tony, what happened to Tony?" And then he says, "He killed your brother," and a thud of music comes in. It just goes right through me every time. It's such an incredibly strong and powerful moment. And I love, too, the beauty of going from the rumble to this beautiful young girl.
Yeah.
Hi. You rock my world. My name is Jennifer. But I gotta say, and don't take this the wrong way, because this is gonna segue nicely into my question. I can't help it, for whatever reason, maybe because of his songs, Riff has always had my heart. And I never knew that you played Riff. And so you have this incredible gift in life to have played both roles. And so and I'm only finding this out tonight, and I don't know how many people in the world know this, except for maybe a small enclave. For you, then, can you speak to having embodied both Bernardo and Riff? Do you have a favorite, or do you have any insight psychologically into either of the two characters?
Well, I don't have a favorite, really, because I love doing both, but I did the Riff for a year and a half, and the rumble in the theater production ends at the end of Act 1. So you have all of Act 2 before you have to go out for a curtain, for the Somewhere Ballet, which is so beautiful. But in the speakers in the theater, you're hearing everything on stage the whole time. So it's kind of an osmosis, without realizing it, you're hearing, and you're learning everything. I sort of felt like I could do anybody's part because I'm so familiar with everything. I once said to somebody, well, I could have played Anita, I just knew it so well. But
You're great you're a proper actor that you think that,
But so the transition, so to speak, didn't feel like a transition. It just felt I don't know, it just felt right.
And you had Robbins to transition you, as you say, that, Robbins was directing you in both roles.
He was, yeah.
Yeah.
Jerry.
Now, you are here to support the Charge Syndrome
That's right.
Foundation and the George Chakiris for Charge
Right.
Syndrome. And if you just say a little bit about that for us, we have, well, actually, I want to tell people that we have a representative of the Charge Foundation here who's and going to be, you told me your names and I wrote them down and I lost the piece of paper in the dark. But please, because this is, yeah.
The way I became involved was
Yes.
a couple of years ago. I met this wonderful girl. She's here tonight, Isabel Kluver, and I can't remember how we connected, but she in her school, they did a production of Romeo and Juliet and West Side Story. And then they saw the film. I think she saw it for the first time, and she fell in love with the movie, and especially Bernardo. So we finally had the opportunity of meeting a couple of years ago, and we've become really good friends ever since. And Isabel was born with Charge syndrome, and so I care about her. So of course, it's a wonderful thing to raise money for. It's important, all of these things. But it's a very complicated syndrome, and maybe they would be able to address it more, explain it more better than I could. But it's CHARGE. Each letter stands for something else, but it affects children. They're born deaf, they're born blind, lots of different things. Isabel is now 16, and she's had something, if I understand this right, at least 300 surgeries.
Oh.
So it's complicated, but she's an amazing young girl.
Could you say, and tell us a little bit more?
Yes, so as George said, we're here, they're doing some benefit tonight where a lot of the funding is going to go to the Charge Syndrome Foundation. The Charge syndrome is the leading congenital cause of deafblindness. So most of the individuals with Charge are considered deafblind. They have some hearing, some usable vision, but dual sensory loss overall. There's a lot of other things that go along with it as well. It's what they call a midline syndrome, so a lot of things in the body that have left and right sides are affected. So it's the ears, the nose, the eyes, the heart, the kidneys, the lungs. There's many things that can be involved. And we have information downstairs if anybody's interested. We have brochures if anybody would like, where they can read about us and learn a little bit more. I can tell you some of the research that we're doing and money that's going towards that as well.
Wonderful.
Always love to talk about it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So you're here, and tomorrow, if any of you want to come back and see the film, George will be back with Peter Felicia, and be interviewed again.
Yeah.
So that'd be wonderful. And one last thing I want to say, George, you are a wonderful jewelry designer.
Oh, right. Thank you.
How did you get into that?
Oh, I've tried not to make this too long. I was always away working for many months at a time, and I had a little dog, a little Italian greyhound. It looked like Bambi. That's what the kids in the neighborhood call him. And I came back. I just finished doing a play in London. And I came back, and I looked at Sammy. That was his name. And I thought, 9 months is a long time out of his life.
Yep.
I love this dog. So I decided, I'm staying home. I'm not going anywhere. And that's exactly what I did. So I stopped looking for work in show business at all, but I accidentally started taking, I don't remember how it happened, I started taking lessons in silversmithing and in making and designing and making jewelry, and it just kind of took over. I loved it. I had a freestanding garage that was a studio, so I could be with Sammy and do what I loved doing too, and I really loved it. And without realizing it, over time, I had made a number of pieces that I guess could be called a collection. And the manufacturer I work with downtown introduced me, I'm sorry, this is really long, to a Japanese distributor who saw my stuff and liked it. And then, so now he's distributing in Japan, and I have a website, and I'm selling at a beautiful shop in LA as well. So yeah, it kind of took over.
So how cool is that?
I've really loved it. Yeah.
Right. You can go online and see George Chakiris' doing. All right, all right. Well, it's time for me to wrap up, but it's just such an honor to meet you, and thank you so much.
It's great
Thank
to
you.
meet you as
Thank
well.
you.
And thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.
Yara. So please enjoy West Side Story in all of its greatness and have a wonderful time. Thank you for coming.
Enjoy. I'd now like to welcome to the stage Susan Haskins Doloff, again, executive producer and co-host of Theater Talk on PBS, and our very special guest this evening, George Chakiris.
Wow. Hey, thank you. Wow. Thanks very much. Thank you. Wow. You're so nice. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, bravo, George Chakiris.
Hey, well, you were nice.
I'm Adam Natali. I'm the director of SVA Theater. We're so pleased to have you here tonight for this special screening of West Side Story, even if you did happen to watch it on PBS last night. So on the big screen here, you're in for a real treat, and we're thrilled to have Academy Award-winning actor George Chakiris with us here this evening. So he'll be here afterwards to do a Q&A with Susan Haskins Doloff, the executive producer and co-host of Theater Talk on PBS. So if you watch that, you'll recognize her. And I'm so glad to have my friend and colleague Leslie Ann Bennett here tonight, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about the event. But a few quick notes. First off, please silence your cell phones. We like to really have the cinematic experience here, and the lights and the sounds are annoying, I'm sure. And the other thing is, traditionally, sometimes this movie is shown with an intermission. We won't have that intermission this evening, but there will be sort of like a minute or two pause. So if you feel like running to the restroom and getting back, there'll be a minute or two pause in there. And then, as you probably saw on your way in, this screening, and as well as the one tonight, the one tomorrow at 7, so if you want to come back, we're welcome to have you back, is benefiting the Charge Syndrome Foundation, and Leslie will tell you a little bit more about that as well. So welcome, Leslie.
Thank you all for coming. First of all, I want to thank everyone that came. This is an extraordinary opportunity, actually, to see West Side Story I think the way it was meant to be seen, which is on the big screen. And I personally fell in love with this film when I was a child.
To applaud when my name came on the screen, but those other names, Jerome Robbins, Leonard Bernstein,
Well, and I want to ask you
applause,
about them. Yes, but I first want to say I was sitting there watching the film, thinking about how much has changed and how much has stayed the same, and you have stayed the same. You look remarkably wonderful for 54 years after this film was shot, right?
54,
right.
Yeah.
1960 you were shot, or 61.
61. It was
61,
released in 61, right? Yeah.
So I'm going out of order here, but first I want to ask you, as you watch the film now, was there a thought that dominated your mind as it drew to a close?
Well, I'm always overwhelmed and awed by the beauty of this film and the people behind this film, Jerome Robbins, Leonard Bernstein.
My father directed musicals my whole life, and this one just stuck in my head. And to be here tonight and to be able to honor not only my father's legacy, but musicals in general. I think every generation has a musical that we're drawn to, that we feel passionate about. And then there are certain films that become so iconic as musicals that every generation falls in love with it, even if it's brand new to them. And this is one of those films. When I was doing research to prepare for tonight, one of the things I found out was this is been voted as one of the most culturally influential films of all time, not just musicals, but of every kind of film. So with that being said, this is a very important night for George as well, because a portion of the proceeds benefit the Charge Syndrome Foundation, for which he's very passionate about. And the young lady that inspired him, Isabel Kluber, is here tonight with us. So we welcome her and her mother.